Hey guys, today I'll show you a sci-fi horror TV series named Stranger Things Season 4 Part 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a shot of Dr. Brenner, who was attacked and seemingly got killed by the monster in Season 1. Back in 1979, when he first arrived in the small town of Hawkins, his life was extremely regular, starting each day with a timer, completing the crossword puzzle in the newspaper within a set time. Then he would wash up, change his clothes, and tighten his tie. He then went to work at the energy laboratory. The camera shifts to the Rainbow Room in the lab. In the second season, a girl with the code number 008 appears, possessing a superpower that causes hallucinations. She once played with another test subject, 11, in the Rainbow Room. This indicates that the superpowered test subjects Dr. Brenner cultivated were not just one. At this moment, there is a group of children dressed the same in the Rainbow Room, quietly playing games. When Brenner came in, he took a child to class. When Brenner noticed something was wrong outside, there were screams everywhere in the building. He cautiously approached the door only for it to blast off. Brenner was knocked unconscious on the spot. When he woke up from his unconsciousness, the child beside him had fallen to the ground, lifeless. The hallway's lights were flickering and bodies lay dead everywhere. The situation in the Rainbow Room was even more tragic. A group of children lay in pools of blood. Their bodies were twisted in horror. Only young 11 survived. Her eyes and nose were bleeding and her clothes were stained with blood. Dr. Brenner angrily questioned 11 what on earth she had done, but 11's memory of this is very vague. In the present timeline, after destroying the bunker, she and Will's family moved to California, living in a small town called Reno. Will's mother, Joyce, found a new job, a work-from-home telemarketing position. It was now March of 1986. 11 went to the local high school with Will. After the last battle with the spider monster, her superpowers disappeared, and her academic performance was not outstanding. She became a normal girl, busy with homework every day. Only writing letters to her boyfriend Mike could relieve her mood. Will's grades were quite good, and he even had time for artistic creation. His brother Jonathan, on the other hand, was waiting for university admission letters. He and Nancy had agreed to go to the same university. Now idle, he worked part-time and became close friends with a local pizza businessman. When 11 first entered the school, an off-screen voiceover narrates a letter she wrote to Mike, expressing how good her life is, how her grades are improving, and how she has made new friends. However, when she tries to greet her classmates, no one responds. A small group in the class even takes pleasure in bullying her. As the voiceover of her letter ends, the scene cuts to Mike reading the letter. His parents remind him to be home earlier in the evening, as he has to catch a morning flight the next day. It turns out it's the end of the school term, and spring break is about to begin. Mike promises to spend spring break with 11 in California. Meanwhile, Dustin convinces his girlfriend Susie to hack into the school system and change his language class grades. Robin is seen applying makeup in Steve's car, as they're attending a pep rally in the early morning. The so-called pep rally is not a graduation ceremony. It's an event held after the economy of Hawkins recovers from the monster attack, where the school reestablishes its basketball team, vowing to win this year's high school basketball championship. The captain of the basketball team, Jason, is a handsome young lad whose eloquent speech stirs up the students' enthusiasm. His girlfriend, Chrissy, who is a cheerleader, flaunts their relationship at the rally, evoking envy among the crowd. However, the group's dynamics are strange. Lucas, wanting to escape his bullied past, joined the Hellfire Club after entering high school. He doesn't hang out with the group, instead opting to follow the basketball team, becoming a substitute member who never gets to play. This creates a rift between him and the group. Tonight is the basketball league's final match, and Lucas wants his friends to come and watch, but both Mike and Dustin refuse. The president of the Hellfire Club, Eddie, is graduating this year, so tonight will be his last battle. This disagreement causes a bitter parting among the group. On Joyce's side, she receives a parcel in broad daylight, covered in Soviet stamps. Inside is a peculiar porcelain doll. She wonders who could have sent this. Joyce calls the investigating reporter to discuss it. Initially, the reporter thinks it could be a bomb or a listening device sent by Russian spies, so he instructs Joyce to destroy the doll from a safe distance. But when nothing happens, they find a piece of paper inside the doll's stomach. The message, cut out from newspapers, claims that Sheriff Hopper is still alive. At the school, 11 and Will are in the middle of a class where the teacher has asked the students to tell a story about a hero. A girl named Angela has prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which earns 11's applause from the class. When it's 11's turn, she has handcrafted a model of the cabin and Sheriff Hopper, wanting to share her father's deeds with her classmates. As she stands on the stage explaining, Will, seated below the podium, is being poked in the leg by a girl who is teasing him. But Will pulls his leg away, seemingly uninterested in the girl. At this point, Angela starts to mock 11, claiming that her topic doesn't meet the requirements because Hopper is neither a celebrity nor a hero. Even the teacher doesn't support her. 11 on the stage is on the verge of tears. After school, Will chases after her to comfort her. 11 then leaves the school. Max encounters Chrissy coming out of the school psychologist's office. However, she too has been asked to attend counseling. It turned out, ever since she witnessed Billy's death, Max has been living with guilt, regretting that she didn't step forward to rescue her stepbrother. She often suffers from headaches and nightmares. Later, she and her mother are abandoned by her stepfather, who takes all their assets. Her mother has to work 2 jobs to support the family, making life very difficult. They have to move to a trailer park. Max's grades have been slipping, but she hasn't been honest with her teacher and just makes up lies to get by. Outside, she runs into Lucas, who is hanging out, and invites her to watch the game, thinking it might help Max find a new focus and become more positive. But Max doesn't appreciate it and reaffirms that they have broken up. She then goes to the restroom to take some painkillers and encounters Chrissy again, who is hiding in the bathroom, forcing herself to vomit. Max wants to help, but she rejects her outright. However, after he leaves, Chrissy hears a knock on the door. She thinks it's Max coming back, but when she turns to scold, she hears her deceased mother's voice. After the lights flicker, her mother's voice becomes angry. Looking through the crack of the door, she sees a pair of charred feet walking towards her. But as Chrissy's resistance increases, the apparition instantly disappears, as if everything she just saw and heard was a hallucination. On the other side of town, the members of the Hellfire Club have gathered at a restaurant. The club president, Eddie, is reading a newspaper at the table. With the interpretation of the media and various influencers, Dungeons & Dragons has been labeled as a cult game, suspected of being related to satanic worship. However, only those who really play the game know it's just a game. Eddie is indifferent to the media's views and even gives public speeches, his performance art so exceptional that the rigid-minded Jason finds him hard to stomach. Dustin attempts to get Lucas off the hook by persuading Eddie to postpone the game. Eddie, a senior who had failed to graduate last year, is confident that he will get his diploma this year. He doesn't want to miss the last battle before graduation, so he instructs Dustin and Mike to find substitutes. Under his overbearing attitude, the 2 boys have no choice but to follow his orders. Mike thinks of his sister, Nancy, but she's too busy working part-time at the school newspaper during the holidays and can't even spare time to meet her boyfriend, Jonathan. So Nancy naturally refuses Mike's request. Mike and Dustin end up wasting half a day for nothing. But then Dustin thinks of someone and quickly takes Mike to invite the person. They run so fast that they brush past Chrissy, who seems a bit off. Chrissy crosses the playground alone and walks into the woods, looking around a wooden table as if she has an appointment. However, when she calls out, she hears the sound of a bell. She checks and sees a clock hanging on a tree. After it rings 4 times, the glass of the clock shatters, and many small spiders crawl out from the center, startling Chrissy into a hasty retreat and running into Eddie, who has just arrived. Eddie is the person she's been waiting for. Chrissy wants to buy some chilling stuff from him, ones that are more potent. Eddie doesn't have any ready at hand, but promises to take her home to get the stash later that night. 11 failed her exam, a disappointment that her teacher clearly expressed. Her inner melancholy deepened. After school, she carried a handmade wooden house on her way home. Halfway there, she was tripped by Angela and fell. Her wooden house even got trampled on. Anger surged through 11 as she gathered herself, intending to use her superpowers for revenge. But her pose had no effect, drawing loud laughter from the onlookers. It wasn't until her teacher arrived that the situation was diffused. Although 11 didn't tell on Angela, the teacher knew who was behind the mischief and took Angela away for questioning, which only deepened the resentment between the 2 girls. Meanwhile, 2 battles were about to start at Hawkins High School. One was a basketball league match, with the gym being filled to capacity. Among the crowd, Lucas couldn't see any familiar faces. His friends, Mike and Dustin, as well as his sister Erica, were on their way to participate in a game called Hellfire. Upon seeing a middle school student participating in the game, Eddie disagreed initially, but to his surprise, this kid was a pro. He was not only sharp-minded, but also had an intimidatingly high character level. So Eddie promptly invited the young pro to play together. At the same time, the basketball game was heating up, and victory seemed within reach. Unexpectedly, a player was tripped and a teammate was injured, forcing the reserve player Lucas to take the field. Despite his lack of experience, Lucas played well and scored many points for the team. At the decisive moment of the board game, it all fell on Erica, and the outcome of the basketball game depended on her brother Lucas. In the end, the siblings lived up to expectations, scoring crucial points for their teams and winning the games. As they dispersed and Erica was rejoicing over the victory, Lucas felt a bit lost, forcing a smile as he went out to celebrate with his teammates. Max had been following the events and went out to feed the dog after hearing the news report. Coincidentally, she bumped into her neighbor returning home, Eddie and Chrissy, who come back to fetch the goods. Eddie lived in a caravan with his uncle, who worked the night shift at the factory to make ends meet, leaving the house empty. However, Eddie was forgetful and couldn't remember where he put the goods. While he was rummaging, Chrissy heard the chime again, this time a clear 4 strikes. She ran into the house in fear, only to find her mother sewing, who turned to greet her with a lifeless gaze. Chrissy quickly shut the door, only to find her surroundings changed, a family portrait hanging on the wall. As her mother became irritable, Chrissy ran downstairs to seek help from her father, only to find him tied to the sofa, eyes and mouth sewn shut. At this point, Eddie finally found the goods for the trade, but no matter how he shouted, Chrissy, who was in the living room, did not move, and the lights flickered inexplicably. Until now, it's revealed that Chrissy was not hallucinating, but had been targeted by a monster from the upside down. In her consciousness, a burnt corpse walked down from the upstairs, slowly descending while chanting Chrissy's name. Chrissy tried to escape, but found the exit nailed shut. As the monster's claw touched Chrissy's cheek, her body lifted into the air in reality. Then the monster pierced her skull with its claw. Her body hit the ceiling, her bones breaking all over, even her eyes bizarrely exploded, blood splattered all over her face. On the other side, Max woke up from a nightmare, swallowing a painkiller to calm her nerves. She then heard the sirens of police cars outside. Several vehicles parked outside her neighbor's house. Her mother was certain that Eddie, the bad boy next door, was up to his old tricks again. Eddie's uncle was sitting at the doorstep and also appeared shocked. He had just finished a night shift and returned home to sleep, only to find a mutilated female corpse on his floor. He tried to tell the police that he was innocent. After Sheriff Hopper disappeared in the bunker battle, his deputy, Powell, was promoted to sheriff and had been in contact with the U.S. military. Forensics was collecting fingerprints and taking photographs, while Powell was on the phone informing the military that another strange incident had occurred in Hawkins. The case was quickly reported by media outlets, although the victim and the modus operandi were not disclosed, only revealing that the deceased was a high school student. The series of bizarre incidents had people terrified, thinking a devil was at work in the town. The police now had 2 suspects. The primary suspect was Eddie, who had disappeared without a trace. The other suspect was the basketball team captain Jason, the boyfriend of the victim Chrissy. To celebrate their victory in the game, Jason had taken the team to Benny's Burger. The place was now an empty building, but it was enough for the police to arrest Jason on charges of trespassing. During the interrogation, Sheriff Powell asked about Eddie's whereabouts. Jason jumped to conclusions, believing that Eddie had killed his girlfriend Chrissy. He found a group photo of the Hellfire Club and pointed out Eddie's evil deeds to his team members. He imagined Eddie's heinous act of sacrificing Chrissy to the devil. The scene cuts to a colonel from the military examining the body. Lucas tried to defend the Hellfire Club, explaining that they were merely a board game group and had no dealings with the devil. However, due to the widespread belief, nobody believed him. They even suspected that he had ties to the Hellfire Club. Lucas could only use his sister Erica as a shield to avoid becoming a target. But with Jason's impassioned speech, a hunt for Eddie had begun. There was another group looking for Eddie, Max and Dustin, who knew a bit about the situation. Max had noticed the flickering lights the night before and spotted Eddie sneaking away in his car through the window. She suspected the situation was related to the Upside Down and therefore didn't tell the police. Instead, she went to Dustin to figure out what to do. Dustin trusted Eddie's character, firmly believing that he would never kill. He decided to go to the video store to borrow a phone to call around to Eddie's friends. Perhaps in this way they could find him and learn what had happened. Meanwhile, a plane was heading from Hawkins to California. Mike handed 11 flowers as soon as he got off the plane. He then awkwardly greeted Will and Jonathan. Will was holding a painting, hesitating for a long time without giving it away. He could only follow the crowd and watch Mike and Eleven display their affection. Eleven excitedly talked about the itinerary. Mike asked her if her friend was coming, and Eleven made an excuse to change the subject. Will was confused as Eleven didn't have any friends, but he didn't expose the lie. The group went to a local ice skating rink. Jonathan and the pizza man, however, didn't participate, instead going to a junkyard on the outskirts to play golf. They would come back to pick people up when it was time. Eleven lied again, claiming that she often came here to play. When Will found an opportunity to ask her why, Eleven insisted she was not lying, but she was obviously under a lot of pressure. Will laced up his skates and followed behind, not wanting to break the atmosphere of the loving couple. Angela and her group just arrived at the ice rink to see a girl complaining about Eleven playing with a boy. They wanted to get back at her for being scolded by the teacher last time, so they went over to chat and invited Eleven to skate. To maintain her lie, she had to agree. But when she was led to the center of the rink, followed by a man carrying a video camera, Will noticed that something was wrong. He told Mike the truth, but it was too late. The prank had begun. With the beat of the music, a group of people surrounded Eleven, calling her a freak. By the time Mike stopped the man, Eleven was drenched in a drink. The crowd who loved to watch the excitement laughed. Eleven wanted to cry but held back the tears. Seeing her lover rushing towards her, she found a place to hide. Mike and Will searched everywhere, even daring to enter the women's restroom, but they couldn't find Eleven. Actually, Eleven hadn't gone far. She was just hiding in a storeroom only accessible to staff, silently wiping away her tears. She heard laughter from outside. She pulled open the window and saw Angela and her group laughing at the video camera. She wanted to go out and reason with them, demanding Angela apologize and help her maintain her story. But the more upset Eleven was, the more laughter she attracted. In a fit of anger, she picked up a skate and hit Angela in the face, drawing blood. After the sweet taste of revenge, Eleven didn't feel happy. She stood there stunned. Under the malicious gaze of the onlookers and the painful wailing of Angela, even Mike and Will were panicked. Eleven felt isolated and alone, her mind filled with overlapping questions from Mike and Dr. Brenner. Joyce at home is completely unaware of Eleven's trouble. She is currently discussing a letter with the visiting reporter. Besides the news that Hopper is still alive, the letter also provides a contact number. The letter ends with the name of a restaurant. She knows it because she had agreed to a date with Hopper at that restaurant, a secret between the two of them that no one else knew. This suggested that the letter might have been sent by Hopper. Although the reporter is skeptical, even suspecting that Hopper has been kidnapped, their only option at the moment is to try calling the contact number. To prevent being monitored by the Soviets, the reporter has brought a counter-surveillance device, enough to protect Joyce for a minute-long call without revealing her location. So she dials the number and then turns on a tape recorder. The call is picked up at a phone booth on a roadside in the Soviet Union, but the person on the other end is not Hopper, but a Soviet. He demands that Joyce bring $40,000 to Alaska and find the owner of a fishing shop to make a deal. As long as the money is in place, they will be able to see the person. Joyce asks for proof that Hopper is alive, but the other party refuses, claiming that Hopper is in deep trouble and can't possibly come to the phone. Outside the phone booth, a woman is making a fuss, apparently in a hurry to make a call. The person on the line, not wanting to expose themselves, hangs up in a rush. Afterwards, the reporter listens to the recording over and over, deciphering the content of the woman's rants. Even though much of it is cursing, she uses slang that is typically used to refer to guards. The reporter realizes that the extortionist is likely a prison guard, and that Hopper may have bribed them, hence the deal. Since there's a high chance that Hopper is alive, Joyce has to go to the bank to withdraw money. Hopper is indeed safe. It turned out he dived under the stairs when the railgun exploded. Due to the height, he fainted on the spot. When he woke up and tried to climb up, he saw enemies who had been waiting for a long time above him. As a result, he was taken to the Soviets for interrogation. True to his tough guy image, Hopper endured various torture devices without betraying Joyce. In the end, the officers were forced to send him to a prison in Alaska. This place is like hell for prisoners. Not only do they have to work in severe cold, but they also don't have enough food or warm clothes. Moreover, there's a life-threatening secret hidden there. Returning to the current timeline, Nancy is now the editor of the school newspaper, constantly seeking to break a big story. She initially planned to cover the basketball team's championship win, but a gruesome unsolved murder came up. So she and the head of the newspaper, Fred, decided to visit the crime scene. However, the area had already been fenced off by the police. Except for the residents of the area, no one was allowed in. Nancy lied and claimed that she was a housekeeper hired by Max's mother, as the parents were out and their high schooler needed looking after. Fred also chimed in to support her story. Unexpectedly, the police confronted Fred, claiming they had seen him at a car accident. He had scars on his face from the car crash. Fred quickly explained that it was an accident, only to find the police officer's face suddenly change, his eyes turning white, and several flesh-like tendrils crawling out of his skin. He kept repeating that Fred was a murderer. The scars on Fred's face also began to bleed, but everything that just happened seemed to be an illusion. The police officer had not transformed, and he kindly let the two into the cordoned-off area. As they visited several households, they were all coldly rejected, with only Eddie's uncle left to inquire. Nancy approached him with an attitude of giving it a try. Although he recognized her as a journalist and said he didn't want to answer gossip questions, Nancy managed to persuade him with her eloquent speech. She promised to report the murder case from his perspective. This strategy worked, and the uncle began to talk. He believed his nephew Eddie was not the murderer. The real killer was inherently evil, and a similar case had happened in Hawkins. The killer was a man named Victor who had lost his sanity, murdered his family, and even gouged out the victim's eyes. Although he was later arrested and sentenced, he was only locked up in a local mental hospital. The uncle believed that he had escaped and started to do evil again. But then, Nancy realized that Fred was missing. It turned out that while the two of them were talking, he heard the sound of a bell in the forest. Without saying anything, he followed the sound alone and found a clock on a coffin. After the clock rang 4 times, a group of weeping ghosts stood behind Fred. A girl pointed a clawed finger at Fred, shouting that he was a murderer. Other noseless ghosts echoed the accusation, scaring Fred into running out of the forest. But when he ran onto the road, he saw no pedestrians, only a car consumed by a raging fire. Meanwhile, Nancy searched for Fred until it was dark. Unable to find any clues to Fred's whereabouts, she had no choice but to ask the police for help. At the same time, Max explained the situation to Steve and Robin, and they joined the search for Eddie. After tirelessly calling, they finally found the address of Eddie's boss, who supplied him with the chilling goods. They drove there at night to find him. Even when Dustin rang the bell, there was no response. Max then noticed a light in the warehouse, so they all went there in the dark to try their luck, and indeed, they found Eddie hiding inside. Eddie thought they were there to catch him and almost hurt Steve with a piece of glass. Thankfully, Dustin managed to defuse the situation with a few flirty words. He persuaded Eddie that they were there to help. As long as Eddie told the truth, they could assist. Eddie was hopeless. After all, the situation was too bizarre, and even he found it hard to believe. He told them everything. Upon hearing this, Dustin mentioned the Upside Down, suggesting that what Eddie had encountered was just the tip of the iceberg, and that the truth might be more terrifying than any curse. The scene shifts to Fred. Subconsciously, he sees a person struggling to escape from a burning car. Terrified, he stumbles backward and falls into a grave, lying next to a decaying corpse swarming with spiders. Fred wants to run, but there's no way out. A voice echoes from the dark depths below, and the charred monster appears again. It's calling Fred's name, moving towards him with an eerie calm. The boy, overwhelmed with fear, watches as the monster's claw-like hand reaches for his head. In reality, Fred is lifted into the air, his bones breaking inch by inch, just as they did when Chrissy was killed. His eyes suddenly explode, and then his body falls from a great height onto the ground. He dies in silence, but the pain is immense. The true form of the monster materializes in the Upside Down, its back studded with fleshy tendrils. As these tendrils are detached from the monster and it lands, the camera zooms out, finally revealing the creature's hideous appearance and the swarming bats circling around it. On the other side, the bullied 11 throws a roller skate at the bully girl in anger. The force of the blow causes severe bleeding. Paramedics rush to the scene, which is surrounded by a crowd buzzing with whispers. Sitting on the side, 11 trembles in fear, unable to utter a word. Jonathan and Lucas, who came to pick her up, tried to prevent 11 from feeling traumatized. Despite their attempts to lighten the mood, the kids in the back seat remain solemn. When they get home, they don't dare tell Joyce, who, along with the reporter, is keeping a secret from the kids. They claim that the company is sending him on a business trip, but in reality, they are planning to fly to Alaska to rescue Hopper. Oblivious to this, they fail to notice anything amiss. At the dinner table, Jonathan seems under pressure, lost in his thoughts. Lucas decides to spill the beans about the incident at the roller rink. Although he doesn't name names or blame anyone, Mike is indiscreet and comments that someone has caused a lot of trouble. 11 retreats to her bedroom, lying on her bed in sadness. Meanwhile, the monster in the Upside Down is on the move. Inside a decrepit castle, countless flesh tendrils spiral down, plunging their sharp tips into the monster's back, subsequently lifting its body into the air, as if performing some ritual. The next morning, Lucas wakes up in the burger shop to find that Jason has enlisted 2 helpers to catch Eddie and make him confess. Lucas, not wanting to be ostracized, reluctantly joins the hunt. At this moment, Eddie is still hiding in the warehouse. He hears noises outside and thinks he's been discovered, only to find that it's Dustin and his gang. They bring food for Eddie, telling him that Dustin intercepted police radio chatter with his mind-reading machine and found out that Eddie is now the prime suspect, with an arrest order already issued. There's only one solution: find the real culprit and kill them, thus proving Eddie's innocence. It sounds simple, especially since this group has had experience fighting monsters before. Even without 11's help, they're confident. Eddie, however, is clueless. Suddenly, police sirens wail, and several police cars race past. They have found Fred's body. Sheriff Powell routinely interrogates Nancy but gets sidetracked and ends up spilling the beans about Victor, a fiercely evil man who murdered his entire family and is now confined to a mental hospital. At this moment, Nancy spots a car in the distance. It's Dustin and Steve's car. They return to the first crime scene, sitting at an outdoor table to discuss. Dustin hypothesizes that the murderer is a monster controlled by the Mind Flayer, a new species that uses magic to attack, but he lacks concrete evidence. Nancy realizes that Fred was agitated when he came to interview at the trailer park, just like Chrissy before she died. Although Chrissy had an emotional breakdown in the school bathroom and the locations are different, Robin finds a connection. The killer must have tracked their victims, and the victims must have seen the killer's true face, causing them to panic and seek help. But the idea of a monster won't gain trust from the police. Earlier, Max saw Chrissy coming out of the school psychologist's office, suggesting they had a conversation. The group decides to visit the psychologist, but Nancy has other plans. She teams up with Robin and they leave together. However, after they left, the light bulb in Eddie's house suddenly flickered, and a black crack appeared on the ceiling. Floating in the air with its eyes closed, it was in fact entering a broad consciousness space, monitoring the current lives of everyone in the town. Eventually, it targeted a boy who was heading to find Eddie with Jason when he suddenly had a headache and a nosebleed, but he didn't pay it much attention. They rushed to a car warehouse where a band was practicing. Eddie was the guitarist in the band, but the members didn't know his whereabouts. However, under the intimidation of Jason, they gave a clue. Dustin had been looking for Eddie and might know where he was. So Jason went to Dustin's house, but no one was home. Lucas panicked and tried to tip off Dustin, but his message was vague, and Dustin was left confused. Max took over the walkie-talkie, told Lucas to meet at the school later that night, and they would explain everything then. Dustin wanted to chat more, but was discovered acting suspiciously by Jason. He had to lie, claiming that he had found a clue and knew where Eddie was hiding. Meanwhile, Max had already visited the school psychologist, but she failed to convince the psychologist to help. Max made an excuse to go to the bathroom and stole the key to the psychologist's office. Then, without saying goodbye, she got into the car and told Steve to drive away quickly. They planned to go to the school to look at Chrissy's counseling files. Nancy and Robin hurried to the public library. She suspected that there was something fishy about Victor's case, so she wanted to pull up the reports from the year of the murder. Nancy was annoyed by Robin, who kept prodding into Nancy's personal life, claiming that she and Steve were just friends, as if she was trying to play matchmaker for Nancy and Steve. Despite Robin's eccentricity, she had a stroke of luck at work and quickly found the news records about Victor. In 1959, he was arrested for killing his family, but he refused to admit it. He openly claimed that it was the work of an ancient demon. He had even sought a priest to exorcise the demon, but the attempt failed. The demon was enraged by this and brutally killed his family, taking the eyes of the deceased. It let Victor live as a punishment, but this story didn't spread. Victor himself was confined to a mental hospital. Robin speculated that the police had negotiated a guilty plea with him back in the day. If what Victor said was true, his family could have been the first victims. Joyce and the reporter boarded a plane this morning, and after they left, the atmosphere at home became even stranger. 11 locked herself in her room and did not come down for breakfast, so Mike had to bring up 2 waffles, trying to have a heart-to-heart with her. He wanted this girl to open up and see him as a safe harbor. 11 was at her lowest, fixing both Hopper's cabin and pointing out that Mike didn't understand anything. She felt that Mike, like everyone else, regarded her as a monster even though he said he cared about her. Mike explained that 11 was different from ordinary people. They were merely pawns, but 11 was a superhero. While the young couple was arguing, the doorbell rang downstairs. Jonathan initially thought it was his mother coming back for something, but opened the door to 2 police officers. They had a warrant for 11's arrest because of the roller rink incident and took her away without explanation. Mike chased after the police car, comforting 11 to stay calm and promising to rescue her. Jonathan tried to contact his mother, but she and the reporter were already on a plane to Alaska. In the police station's interrogation room, 11 finally realized the consequences of her impulsive actions. She had given the girl a big blow, but when interrogated by the police, 11 played dumb. Eventually, she was to be sent to a juvenile detention center. Jonathan learned this from the front desk, but he was not her guardian and could not apply to see 11. He could only watch as she was taken away in a prisoner transport vehicle. The vehicle was stopped on the road by 3 cars. A woman in a suit got out, showed her work ID to the guards, and then took over 11. But she turned out to be an underling of Dr. Sam. Sam was originally retiring at the Nevada house until the colonel came knocking one night. He showed Sam photos of peculiar cases. The military believed that the murders were related to the psychic girl. After all, Dr. Brenner had trained her to be an assassin. The colonel suspected that 11 was still alive and that there was government assistance, specifically the laid-off Sam. Therefore, he visited Sam, asking him to hand over 11. Dr. Sam denied everything. His house was searched on the spot, and even his children's homework was taken away. Sam initially thought that Reno was a safe town, so he suggested Joyce move there with 11. But now it was obviously not safe, and Hawkins was in crisis again. He decided to personally take 11, hoping that she could fight the monster with her superpowers. But 11 stated she didn't have powers anymore. However, Sam told her not to worry, and he had a backup plan to restore her powers and make them even stronger than before. But because the military thought 11 was a threat, Sam couldn't reveal her whereabouts and had to take her away secretly. 11 wanted to rescue her friends in danger, so she agreed to Sam's plan. Meanwhile, the woman in the suit took 2 investigators to Joyce's house. At this moment, Joyce is still aboard her flight and will soon arrive at her destination. Upon receiving this news, the prison guard in the jail found Hopper and began to conspire with him. The pilot meeting with Joyce is a smuggler, frequently supplying American goods to the prison guards. As long as he gets his payment today, he will fly to the prison tomorrow. After giving the money to the prison guard, Hopper can board the plane and leave. The prison guard provides an escape route, but will not assist further. If Hopper fails to reach the meeting point, his escape plan will fail. However, Hopper already has a strategy in mind. In the evening, he bribes the working prisoner with food, persuading him to strike his leg chain with a hammer while working on the railroad. The prisoner agrees to do their job after receiving the money, showing no mercy in his actions. By nightfall, Joyce has arrived in Alaska, and Hopper has been returned to prison. He managed to deceive the guard who was inspecting his shackles. Once back in his cell, Hopper removed his shoes and the cloth wrapped around his foot, revealing a deep wound on his foot. Enduring the excruciating pain, Hopper removed the shackles from his foot and began warming up in his cell. On the other side, Jason, following Lucas's clues, found a forest. In the forest, he discovered a cabin, which is actually Hopper's home. After the last big spider monster battle, the cabin has been left in ruins, unattended and unrepaired. Jason instructed his teammates to search all over, while Lucas seized the opportunity to slip away to join the gang at the school. After searching at the school, Max not only obtained Chrissy's files but also discovered Fred's. Both individuals have experienced severe headaches, nosebleeds, and nightmares, all related to past traumas, much like Max's own experiences. Just then, she heard someone calling her from outside. Holding a flashlight, she walked out, only to find an eerie silence in the corridor punctuated by the chimes of a clock. A vintage wall clock was embedded in the wall. Max, like Chrissy and Fred, also started to experience the illusion of the ticking clock. The woman in a suit brings 2 agents into Joyce's house, informing the 3 children that 11 has been taken by Sam to restore her superpowers. The town needs her power to overcome a looming danger. The children are told to stay put at home, and 2 agents will be left behind to protect them. She hands Mike a letter from 11, saying she's off to become a superhero again. However, at this point, their friend Max is in danger, experiencing the same symptoms as Chrissy, seemingly stuck in a trance. Max isn't harmed, however, and she suddenly wakes up when she's near the clock. Even though she's shaken, she has a clear train of thought and analyzes the murder cases. All victims had severe headaches, which worsened to nightmares. They'd see hallucinations related to their traumatic experiences, and once these hallucinations became increasingly terrifying, they'd be killed by the monster. Max has been experiencing headaches for 5 days now. She's unsure of how long she has left, but the first 2 victims were brutally murdered within 24 hours of their first hallucination. This suggests Max might only have until tomorrow. The atmosphere in the room becomes tense. Then there's sudden noise from outside. Steve grabs a lamp to go investigate. To his surprise, Lucas has come to report that Jason has gone completely mad, involving many people in his quest to find Eddie. Dustin is also on the list, but he remains calm as there's a more pressing matter at hand. Max's life is ticking away. The next day, Jason realizes he's been played. He visits Lucas's home only to find it empty. Lucas is hiding with others in Mike's basement, troubled by the news Nancy brought about Victor's claims of an ancient demon. Both he and Steve are puzzled, but Dustin is clear-headed. If Victor isn't lying, he's the only known survivor and should have a way to break the curse, and Max might be saved. But there's a question. The upside-down door was opened by 11 in 1983, but Victor's incident happened in 1959. How could the monster from the upside down travel through time to kill? Therefore, Steve believes Victor is lying. Nancy is determined to visit the mental hospital in person. She gets her hands on 2 student IDs from a friend and poses as a star psychology student. The hospital's director is a man of great knowledge. Nancy hopes to persuade him with her scholarly persona and gain access to Victor. This time, she brings Robin along, but before they set off, she must disguise the rebellious girl. After the 2 of them leave, Max, who has been up all night writing letters, finally puts down her pen. She's been penning missives for her friends to open after her death. Her friends are bewildered by her actions, unsure of how to react. They've never imagined the girl before them might be murdered. Suddenly, Max has a new idea. She wants to go to East Hawkins. Steve is tasked to watch the kids, but he can't resist Max and is compelled to drive her to East Hawkins. En route, they stop by Max's home. She places the letters for her family and relatives on the table. As she's leaving, she sees her mother hanging laundry and goes to say goodbye, warning her mother that something might happen to her and asks her to help deliver the letters. Her mother embraces Max, assuring her that nothing will happen. But when a cloud passes over them, her mother changes her tune, telling Max that if anything happens, it's her own fault. Max tries to pull away, but the sound of a bell rings and the person before her becomes the monster that's been hunting her. It mocks her for writing letters, saying it won't atone for her mistakes, but the monster doesn't kill her this time. When Max comes out of the hallucination, her mother has disappeared. She doesn't dare to stay and quickly returns to the car, unwilling to share what she has experienced. Meanwhile, Nancy and Robin have arrived at the mental institution. Robin is uncomfortable in her ladylike disguise, and Nancy, afraid that she'll give them away, advises her to stay silent when they meet the director. The director reviews their IDs and a letter of recommendation from a professor, but he doesn't agree to Nancy's request because Victor is an extremely dangerous patient. But when Robin loses her temper, her angry yet respectful tirade convinces the director to allow them 10 minutes alone with Victor. As the director leads the way, he introduces a new type of therapy. If patients listen to a song with personal significance, it can stimulate them. But Victor hasn't received this treatment. He's kept in the ward for criminals, in the cell furthest inside. He sits there scratching the table surface with his fingernails. When Victor learns that he has visitors, he's not pleased, assuming they're journalists. But when Nancy reveals that they've come for his help, suspecting the ancient demon has returned, he turns around. However, he's blind, his eyes having suffered some torment. In the town of Reno, 2 agents were assigned to protect Jonathan, but they spent their time lounging on the sofa, watching Daniel CC Channel. Jonathan was infuriated, feeling that the agents weren't doing their job, so he planned to secretly take Will and Mike away, heading to Hawkins to join the fight. So he planned to call for pizza delivery, providing an opportunity to escape through the window. The agents, feeling peckish, agreed to the pizza order. While waiting for the pizza, the gang quietly packed their belongings. However, when the doorbell rang, it wasn't Jonathan's friend, but soldiers fully armed. An agent was shot on opening the door. The other agent tried to shield the kids, but was also shot. Just then, the pizza man arrived, and seeing his friends rushing out, he had no choice but to start his car and help them escape. Meanwhile, trouble arose for Joyce. They took their money to meet a smuggler in Alaska. The prison guard had given Hopper an escape route: remove the handcuffs, traverse the forest, head west towards a gray-topped church. The smuggler was supposed to meet him there once he received the ransom. By tomorrow night at the latest, Hopper would be returned. However, the prison guard wasn't optimistic about this escape. Hopper, however, was confident. While hammering railway tracks, Hopper deliberately broke the handle, then asked the guard for a new tool. When the jailer entered the tool room, Hopper followed unnoticed. He quickly knocked out the jailer, but someone else noticed the situation. Another jailer, seeing Hopper missing from his post and no one outside the tool room, armed himself and went to investigate. He found Hopper removing his handcuffs. In the ensuing struggle, a gun discharged accidentally. The gunshot brought more jailers. Hopper could only barricade the door with a table and escape barefoot over the rooftop. By the time the jailers broke into the tool room, they found a bomb ticking away. It exploded, drawing everyone's attention, while Hopper was already speeding away on a nearby snowmobile. When Hopper hid in the church, huddled on a dilapidated bed and subsisting on peanut butter, soldiers stormed in, beat him up, and hauled him back. The prison guard who helped him escape was also captured. It turned out the smuggler had betrayed them. While counting the ransom brought by Joyce, he offered her and the reporter some coffee. But after a few cups, they felt drowsy and eventually passed out. The smuggler, hoping to make extra profits, swallowed the ransom. Realizing both Hopper and the prison guard were valuable and that the two Americans also fetched a good price, he contacted the warden. He planned to deliver Joyce and the reporter to prison the next day. On the other hand, after Nancy disclosed Max's situation, she finally persuaded Victor to speak up about his past. However, Victor didn't consider himself a lucky survivor. Though he was alive, his life was no different from living in hell. Back then, he was a retired soldier. Thanks to the inheritance left by his wife's grandfather, their family of 4 could afford to buy a decent villa. His daughter loved the new house, but his younger son, Henry, seemed a bit depressed. Victor thought he was just being sensitive and didn't pay much mind to it. But a month after they moved into their new home, many mysteriously mutilated animal corpses began to appear in the vicinity, causing panic within the family. Victor reported it to the police, who suspected a wildcat was responsible and didn't investigate further. Victor, however, suspected evil forces were at play and started keeping watch at the door with a gun every night. Then it seemed like everyone in the house became cursed. His wife would fill the bathtub with water, only to find it crawling with spiders. Yet when Victor went to check, he found nothing unusual. His daughter started having nightmares, and even Victor himself began to experience hallucinations, seeing a baby carriage being thrown into a burning fireplace, along with the sound of a baby's screams. Victor had ventured into the attic of the villa and found it to be what he believed was a nest for this evil, containing items he had only seen in his hallucinations. He realized the evil had nested in his home. One day, as the radio inexplicably began to play music and the house's light bulbs flickered, Victor became certain of the presence of the evil entity. His wife was lifted to the ceiling, her bones snapping one by one, and her eyes burst before she died. Victor tried to escape with the kids, but opening the front door led him back to the battlefield, a memory from World War II in his mind. As he stood dumbfounded, he heard a faint song from behind. Victor thought it was an angel guiding him and followed the song back to the entrance of his house, only to face a more brutal reality. His daughter was dead, and Henry died a week later after falling into a coma. Victor was framed as the murderer of his family and later was sent to a mental hospital. He once blinded himself with a razor blade and even tried to kill himself, but the hospital director prevented him. After his story, Nancy asked Victor who the angel was. However, overwhelmed by grief, Victor lay on his bed, humming a tune. At this moment, the director, fuming, burst in. He had rechecked the credentials Nancy had given him and discovered they were forgeries. He wanted to turn them into the police. The two girls tried to reason with the director. Robin, however, was no longer as agitated as before. As they passed the music therapy area, she realized how to deal with the monster. Victor had mentioned music in his story, and when Nancy asked him about the angel, he didn't answer, but hummed a tune. The director had previously mentioned that music could stimulate the brain. Perhaps this is the way to bring people trapped in a dreamlike state back to reality. Perhaps they had found a way to save Max. At this moment, Max has arrived in East Hawkins. Guided by Steve, the car is parked at the cemetery. Billy's grave is actually here. She's here to say goodbye to her stepbrother. Sitting in front of the grave, reading the letter written to Billy, expressing her regret for not having saved him at that time, she apologizes to him. However, as Max finishes reading the letter, the bright sunshine is suddenly replaced by darkness. Max hears Billy's voice. Steve becomes a bit impatient and comes over to hurry Max. To his surprise, he discovers that her spirit has left her body. In her conscious space, Billy, covered in blood, walks toward her, saying that Max was hoping for his death, so she stood by and watched at that time. Max denies, but under the insults, she can only step back, falling to the ground. She sees clearly that the person in front of her is not Billy, but the monster. The monster says that time is up, and Max hurries to run away, looking for a place to hide. Meanwhile, Dustin is desperate to contact Nancy, and Nancy and Robin take advantage of the hospital director's lack of attention to escape and drive away. They receive Dustin's distress call. Under their guidance, Dustin rushes to Max's side with a cassette tape and a Walkman, looking for Max's favorite song. But the Walkman has no playback record. At this time, Max in her conscious space finds a place shrouded in red clouds. After walking in, she sees a bizarre scene. An ancient clock is suspended in the air. The ground is full of spider eggs, and stepping on them releases tiny spiders. There are also many isolated pillars, each tied with a body showing a look of terror. The monster says that she will become one of them and hooks the fleeing Max with flesh vines. But just as the monster is about to claim her life, Dustin puts the headphones on Max's head. In the conscious space, a familiar melody is heard. As her body is suspended in the real world, Max recalls her beautiful memories from the past. She breaks free from her restraints and makes a dash for the distant exit, running towards her friends who are waiting for her to return amidst falling rocks and thunder. Ultimately, Max succeeds. She becomes the second survivor. The American military forces break into Jonathan's house. The three children, accompanied by an injured agent, escape in the car driven by the pizza man. On the road, the agent bleeds heavily. As he is on the brink of death, he instructs Jonathan to find Sam, claiming that 11 is in danger. He hands them a pen to contact Nina, but he breathes his last before he can write down the contact details. Just after the agent's death, Jonathan notices they are being pursued, so he quickly instructs the pizza man to take the back roads and hide. Meanwhile, the American soldiers are turning Jonathan's house upside down. They find a letter in the trash that 11 had left for Mike. The colonel, holding the letter, threatens another agent, demanding him to disclose 11's whereabouts. It turns out that 11 had entered Nevada 12 hours earlier. Under Sam's guidance, they arrive at a base in the desert. This was once an underground launch well for missiles. Since it hadn't been used for many years, the base remained after the missiles were removed. Sam put it to use, carrying out a project to restore superpowers. Several researchers had given up their normal lives for this. Today, their experiment finally comes into play. The device to restore superpowers is codenamed Nina. However, as Sam introduces the Nina project to 11, an old acquaintance descends from the stairs above. It's Dr. Brenner, who was attacked by the Demogorgon in the first season. Turns out, he didn't die and has become Sam's partner. 11 is tremendously shocked and remembers her tragic past. She runs towards the exit, but now she's just an ordinary girl. She is taken down by 3 men just as she reaches the elevator, and they inject her with a sedative. Brenner comes forward, holding 11 like a father, telling her that she is home now. Meanwhile, in a chilly prison under a snowstorm, the escaped Hopper is caught and brought back. After the warden brutally beats him, he's stripped of his rights to a solitary cell and put into death row with the other inmates. Unexpectedly, the prison guard who helped him escape is also in there. Seeing Hopper's bloodied face, he explains that they've been betrayed. Joyce and the reporter were also betrayed. The smuggler takes advantage of their unconscious state, ties them up, puts them on a plane, and plans to deliver them to the warden as a bounty today. The scene cuts to 2 old friends fishing on the lake. They notice that the door to Eddie's boss house is open. They assume he's been released from prison, but in reality, Eddie, having run out of food in the warehouse, was forced to risk a visit to his boss's house to rummage for food. He even radios Dustin, ordering food delivery and 2 cans of beer. Dustin, Lucas, and Steve, exhausted after the incident, are fast asleep at Nancy's house. Nancy, puzzled, picks up the radio call, only to find that Max is missing. She starts looking for her, fearing that Max might do something reckless. She finds Max in the living room. To avoid being affected by the monster, Max never takes off her headphones. The constant music keeps her alert, and she's managed to sketch out the scenes she saw in the Upside Down, buildings floating in red fog. She feels that the monster was surprised she could enter that world. Dustin suggests that Max has somehow reverse infiltrated the monster's consciousness. As Nancy examines the sketches, she notices a familiar stained glass window. She hastily assembles all the pictures, and sure enough, they form a building she recognizes from a newspaper article. It's Victor's house, indicating that this might be the monster's lair. To confirm this theory, she wakes the others to investigate. Victor's house has become a haunted place due to past gruesome incidents. The front door is nailed shut, but Steve brings a crowbar. Robin uses a brick to break open the locked front door. Once inside, they close the door to prevent suspicion, but the house has no electricity due to unpaid bills, so they use flashlights. Max quickly spots an old clock hanging on the wall, the same one she saw in her visions. They split up to look for clues, but after they leave the hall, the chandelier mysteriously flickers. At Chrissy's funeral, one of Jason's followers, the boy targeted by the monster, is focused on the eulogy when his attention is drawn to a clock hanging on the wall through a partially open door. But the vision is fleeting, and the tortured cries of Chrissy's parents echo in the church. Jason, moved by his girlfriend's parents' words, accelerates his search for Eddie. He gets a photo of Dustin's middle school graduation and identifies Lucas as a member of the Hellfire Club. He believes they are hiding Eddie. Although the boy advises him to inform the police and not to confront the cult recklessly, others don't believe in curses. They think the culprit is a ruthless madman. Jason has listed all the places where the Hellfire Club members have been spotted and decides to check each one. Someone suggests they shouldn't overlook the house of Eddie's boss. An old man fishing this morning saw that the house's door was open, suggesting Eddie's boss might have been released from prison. Jason then notes down this information. On the other side, Eleven wakes up from her unconscious state to find herself back in the rainbow room of the energy lab. Fear fills her and tears cascade down her face. Suddenly, she hears a noise outside. As she investigates, she sees that the rainbow room is filled with children like her, all with superpowers. They seem not to have grown up at all. 11 is filled with doubts, but then she sees a lab-coated administrator approaching from behind, asking her why she overslept. When 11 asks where she is, the administrator doesn't answer. Instead, the overhead light starts flickering. The same scene then repeats. The administrator appears again behind her, asking her why she woke up late. 11 senses something is amiss. Frightened, she turns and bolts towards the exit. But when she pushes the main door open, she finds herself back in the rainbow room. It turns out this is an experiment by Dr. Brenner and Sam. While 11 was unconscious, they placed her in the device named Nina. 11 is unaware that she is in an experimental apparatus. She is confused by all the doors leading back to the rainbow room. She notices the surveillance light in the room is on. She yells at the camera, pleading for someone to let her out, but there is no response. Disoriented, she wanders around until she finds herself in front of a mirror. To her shock, she sees in the reflection that she is still a child. At this moment, Brenner's voice comes over the intercom, explaining the origins of the code name Nina. Nina was a girl who suffered severe mental trauma and buried the tragic memory deep after the accident. 11's situation is similar to hers, also forgetting some things due to a traumatic accident. Now she is in the middle of memory fragments and can only find her way out by herself. 11 then tries to recall the past, although all these memories are taking place in the realm of consciousness. Her physical body still lies in the salty water of the apparatus. In her consciousness, Dr. Brenner is conducting experiments with the children, having them use their superpowers to influence the magnetic field and thus control the brightness of the light bulbs. If they perform well, they get a candy. When it's 11's turn, the administrator gives her special attention, guiding her to focus and feel with her heart to control the energy. But she fails twice and gets ridiculed by her classmates for wasting time. 11's nose bleeds, and when she lifts her hand to wipe it, she sees it's covered in blood. The people around her have disappeared. When she goes to the hallway to look for them, she finds it filled with corpses. In the real world, her heart stops abruptly, and the apparatus begins to sound alarms one after another. Sam hurriedly orders the experiment to stop and provides first aid to 11. As soon as 11 wakes up from unconsciousness, she throws objects at Brenner and then rushes towards the exit. The 3 guards at the door try to intercept her but are knocked unconscious by her superpowers. However, 11 hasn't fully recovered. As Brenner approaches her, she is too weak to resist. But Brenner opens the elevator door, letting her make a choice. 11 wants to become a hero again. After much struggle, she ends up taking Brenner's hand, following him back to continue the experiment. When she made this decision, Jonathan and the gang were in an abandoned car factory. They were at their wits' end. After burying the agent's body, they wanted to find 11 but didn't know what to do next. While Will and Mike were chatting, Will claimed to be afraid to speak his true feelings. In reality, he was simply unable to express his emotions. The pizza man sat in front of the grave, wanting to erect a tombstone for the deceased agent, but found that his pen couldn't write. Suddenly, Mike had a realization. He disassembled the pen and indeed found a string of numbers inside. However, when they found a nearby public telephone booth and dialed the number, no one answered. The only sound that came from the telephone was that of a gaming machine. This indicated that they had connected to a computer. The agent had given them access, but the four of them knew little about computers and had to seek external help. They happened to know someone, Susie, who was Dustin's genius girlfriend living in Salt Lake City. Meanwhile, in a Soviet prison, the prison guard sought help from his former colleague, hoping to trade with Hopper's money. But the colleague didn't agree. Hopper was somewhat self-destructive, believing that he was a cursed man. Whoever fell in love with him would be in danger. His daughter had died of illness years before, and now Joyce was captured. When the roar of a beast was heard coming from within the prison guard remembered that monsters were locked up here. He suddenly realized that they had no way out but death. On the other hand, Joyce and the reporter were tied up and put on a plane by smugglers who were transporting them to the prison. Joyce noticed that the smugglers had impaired hearing, and with the surrounding noise, she knocked over a jar, picked up a shard of glass, and thought about cutting the ropes binding her hands. She planned to subdue the smugglers and have them turn the plane around. Luckily, the reporter was a good fighter, so they went ahead with their plan. When the smugglers discovered what was happening, Joyce had just cut the ropes binding the reporter's wrists. The smugglers threatened Joyce with a gun and underestimated the reporter's strength, resulting in him getting beaten up. However, the reporter only knocked them unconscious. Neither he nor Joyce knew how to fly a plane, and their random operations caused the plane to stall and plummet. Fortunately, there was a snowy forest below which cushioned their fall. Even though the plane crashed, they were not injured. On the other side, Jason finally traced his way to the house of Eddie's boss. Eddie, who was inside, quickly hid upon seeing this. However, he didn't clean up after his meal, which revealed traces of his presence. Eddie contacted Dustin from the warehouse, but Dustin's walkie-talkie was left at the door, and he didn't hear the distress signal. Steve found a hidden compartment in one of the rooms, containing a can of black spiders. After just one glance, he felt as if spiders were crawling on him, which scared him into dropping the can and leaving the room. He bumped into Nancy, who was passing by. Steve still had feelings for Nancy and wanted to confess his feelings, but after hesitating, he didn't break the ice. His strange behavior made Nancy feel weird. At the same time, Lucas was comforting Max. They were certain they would find the originator of all the strange happenings. Lucas even played the piano in the room, but his poor skills made Max laugh. Suddenly, a lamp in the room lit up on its own, then switched off. However, the second and third lamps lit up consecutively. They followed the lights to the living room where they saw the chandelier flickering non-stop. This indicated that the serial killer was in the house, but in the upside down, and the killer seemed to hear their voices. The chandelier suddenly went out, indicating that the killer might have left the room. Everyone in Victor's villa started searching around. They followed the flashlight into the attic and found a light bulb flickering. As the flashlight got closer, it became as bright as day. It turned out this was caused by the killer's actions. This time, its target was the boy, Jason's follower, who was ransacking Eddie's boss's house. The targeted boy was completely unaware of the impending danger. Led by Jason, the gang found the warehouse where Eddie was hiding. But when they broke into the warehouse, they found that the speedboat inside had been taken. The boat hadn't been used for a long time, so Eddie could only row manually. Jason didn't want him to escape right under his nose, so he took off his jacket and jumped into the lake. The targeted boy followed suit. However, just as Jason was about to catch Eddie, the targeted boy began to hear bell sounds. Then he was pulled underwater. When he emerged, he was strangely floating in the air. To the astonishment of Jason and Eddie, the boy's body was grotesquely twisted and broken. He then fell stiffly into the lake and died inexplicably. When the monster was casting its spell, the light bulbs of the flashlights in the villa suddenly exploded, as if unable to withstand the enormous energy. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.